Hello and welcome back to Gupshop. We're your hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Zuhair.
And in this podcast, we cover my journey as a former Catholic into marrying a Muslim man. We cover themes such as relationships, family, and culture as we discuss the joys and challenges of being in a mixed race relationship. In the last episode, we spoke about my first Ramadan and Eid. And now in this episode, we'll bring you back to the present and talk about some of the things we've been up to lately, including our wedding planning and also some of our future plans.
Yeah, well, it's been about 6 months since our nikah. And so we've been planning our wedding. That was the first thing that we kind of had on our checklist.
Yep.
So kind of like the reception. We initially actually had it for this year on November 6th. And then we had to reschedule that pretty recently because of the COVID restrictions.
It took us a very long time to find a venue.
Oh, yeah.
So it was months of just looking around and checking out different venues and sort of setting a budget for our big reception. And we finally decided on one, put down a deposit, booked in a date, and then unfortunately we had the lockdown, and so things were very unclear for a while whether or not we'd be able to go ahead with the wedding with the numbers that we wanted. We decided to push it back to next year, May next year. So about 6 months later, 6 months. But instead we decided to do a very small civil ceremony in the Hunter Valley, which is a place where we had the proposal and means a lot to us. And we always sort of wanted to do something there, some sort of ceremony there. So that's what we've been planning.
We wanted to do an outdoor ceremony.
Yeah, in particular,
So,
like in the vineyards.
Yeah, well, it's going to be exactly the same estate. It's like a private property that we're going to do it on. But that's kind of what we replaced the big wedding with for this year.
Even though it turned out that we could have had those numbers basically.
Oh, that wouldn't have been possible anyway because they only announced it just now.
Yeah, I know, but like if we had just stuck to that date and just planned everything as if it was going ahead, then we could have actually.
Yeah, but that's impossible.
Done it.
Like
I know.
We were planning for like 170 people, and they were only allowing 50, and then they announced that you could have unlimited just the other day. So if you had hypothetically just left your guest list at the full amount, then you could have done it, but it was hugely risky. But anyway, this was meant to be our small sort of wedding, and it's kind of, even the small, like we're only going to have 20 people, and even that has turned into this massive thing, and
very expensive.
The costs just get out of control, and the scope of it all, like, because you want to make it look as nice as possible, and then every little thing just keeps adding on and compounding the total expense. So it's going to be like way, way more than we thought, and it took way longer to plan, and we're still planning it. It's only 2 or 3 weeks out now, and there's still things that we need to get done. So it's just, I think wedding planning in general is just, even if you try and keep it small, it's really stressful, and particularly with the lockdown, because we had to basically order everything online without being able to see it and without being able to talk to people and kind of, walk into a store and see what the options are.
Yeah, just this last week has been the first week where we could actually go into retail shops. Really not much time.
Yeah. But we've been trying to, do the virtual consultations and where possible. But it's not the same.
We bought a bunch of stuff online as well. So Etsy has been really helpful. I didn't really use it before. I only used it like once or twice, but there's a lot of cool stuff on there, and a lot of like small designers.
It's big for like craft.
Yeah.
Like customized stuff as well.
There's a lot of customized stuff you can get, like instead of, using a printing invitation printing company. You can just find them on there, probably a lot cheaper.
And a lot more variety and flexibility as well. Because as big companies, you kind of have to just choose from what they have, and you can't really be very specific with what you want. Whereas these people, I think there's like hundreds of sellers for each kind of thing, especially with events.
Oh, it's like massive for weddings. Everything you could need for a wedding, they have heaps of stuff on there. So yeah, I really like it.
Most of the sort of customized stuff that we're going to have at the Hunter Valley wedding, we got off Etsy. And I guess the delivery times is a bit of an issue because we were really short on time. So I think we ended up paying for express delivery for a couple of things.
Yeah, that's the only thing I don't like is like some of the delivery costs are very expensive, even for standard, because it's coming from like the other side of the world. And if you're paying like $40 for delivery, I think that's pretty ridiculous. Even if the item is cheap, I just can't justify spending that much on delivery.
Yeah, well, sometimes like I swear it's just they lower the cost and then they add it onto the shipping, so it looks cheaper, and then you end up paying the same.
Pretty much.
So, but anyway, it's a good option, especially for us because we didn't have access to stores, and the bigger companies were charging way too much for our numbers. But yeah, so that worked out well. Now we're kind of in the final stages of planning that. Obviously, it's only less than 3 weeks away now, so
it's getting close.
Be very close.
And we haven't even planned the actual ceremony in terms of we basically get to write
the vows and stuff.
The vows and the whole thing. We get to like sort of set out what we want the celebrant to say, and because we haven't really like attended a civil ceremony, we don't really know.
We have attended a few, but they didn't have vows. They just kind of
civil though. Like they're always religious. Yeah, right? It's different. I mean, it's pretty similar in some ways. Like some of the things just carry over as like a Western style wedding.
I mean, it's mostly similar. Like you walk down the aisle.
Yeah, I guess
you still have
the ring exchange and
and the celebrant or the
she does a speech. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess they don't really say now you can say your vows kind of thing. Whereas in a civil ceremony, I think they kind of, I mean, it's pre-planned, but they kind of give you an opportunity to say your own customized vows. That's something we still need to think about. And then we actually haven't thought about the ceremony, which is the main part, like the main reason we're doing this. And we haven't actually thought about the ceremony.
There's just so many other things that you need to think about. And like you don't really know how hard it is until you have to do it yourself.
Yeah. Like, well, it's like you think it's going to be 20 people and half of that is our families.
Yeah. It's still intimidating though. Like we still want it to go well.
Yeah, well, you don't want it to, you don't want to invite people out. Like Hunter Valley for everyone is at least a 2-hour drive coming from Sydney, and you don't want to invite people out and then just put on a complete sort of, I don't know, an event that doesn't live up to the name. The Hunter Valley in itself is really nice, like the scenery and the surroundings of where we're having a ceremony looks really nice. So I think that kind of takes a lot of the pressure off, but still in terms of our decor and in terms of, we want that outdoor look, and we haven't chosen like a, what would you call like a venue that specializes in weddings. There isn't like a spot.
It's like DIY. We're kind of just it's not a place that's known for weddings, so it's just accommodation. So although I do think they probably have had a few weddings over the years.
I don't think so. I think that's just accommodation.
Sure, we're not the first.
I think we are.
No way.
I think we are. It's literally an accommodation with 3 villas. It's a very small scale. The estate is massive. Like they've got a lot of land, but I can't imagine anyone's hosted a wedding there.
I feel like they might have, because when we spoke to the owner, he sort of had an idea of the kind of stuff we would need to be bringing in, like the marquees and.
Because he said the word marquee.
Yeah, but he knew about it, so I'm sure that he's
everyone knows what marquee means, so it doesn't. It's like only for weddings.
I guess so, but you'd have to know about weddings to know that we would want one, like Hunter Valley weddings.
We can ask him, but my guess would be I haven't.
Let's ask.
Either way, like this is it's not a wedding venue; it's an accommodation, and we're kind of doing it ourselves to turn it into a wedding venue. So there's a lot involved with doing that.
Our guests are going to be staying there. 2 nights.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a weekend trip.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting for other people because they can come and have a getaway for 2 days without
probably
having
be their first holiday
since lockdown.
Yeah,
or the last
most likely.
3 months or so.
Yeah.
So they should be grateful.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just so much that goes into it. Even with the numbers that we have, it doesn't really change or take away from the stress.
It also doesn't make it much cheaper. Like
Yeah,
having
it
20
doesn't.
people versus like 100, you really don't save much on the cost. You still have to make it look just as nice.
It actually costs more because
Per person, yeah, I think it would.
all of the wedding venues and vendors, they price their things based on like the higher number you have, the cheaper it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get any cheaper just because you have less numbers.
Although I do know of like elopements being a thing, and that's like really small type of weddings. But I think those are cheaper. They come in packages of like 500 or 1,000. Like, I don't know what's included. I think it's very small, as in like just a celebrant, and then like some photography companies are like associated with them, so it does include some photography. But yeah, I think we should have probably looked into that. But they have packages that sound pretty good.
Yeah, well, we kind of made our own package.
Yeah.
Every single thing, like everything you need for a wedding, we've had to source ourselves. And we haven't used one company to do any 2 things. It's like one company,
pretty much
each thing.
Yeah, like so many different vendors that we've been dealing with. But it's all finally coming together and only a few weeks left. So I'm nervous but excited.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the holiday part as well because we have the Hunter Valley wedding, and then on the Sunday we actually go to Port Stephens, which is like a coastal town about an hour away from the Hunter. So the Hunter Valley is more inland, and then Port Stephens is by the coast.
Beachy.
Yeah, more
and we're
beachy.
going with your sister's family as well.
Yeah.
And we got like a really nice Airbnb to stay in. That's literally like steps away from the water.
Yeah.
The backyard is the beach, basically. So yeah, that should be fun if the weather is okay. Hopefully it's not raining.
It should be. That's exciting. But that's kind of for the last 6 months we were planning for what we thought was going to be the main reception, and then we moved that to May, and then now we're planning for this. And I'm sure once this is done, we got to get into planning for the May reception. So we've got that to look forward to, but there's a lot of time in between then. And now that in Sydney things are looking up from a COVID perspective, most things are reopening slowly, and actually the other day they announced international travel is back on the cards. So I guess for me, one of the things that I wanted to do was travel before around the time we got married. So now that seems like we might have a window again from like December to May, which is about 4 or 5 months, where we can do a few trips if the borders stay open. Like they've done this before. We had the travel bubble with New Zealand, I think for maybe a month before COVID stopped it. So we have that bubble again, I think, starting next week. But we also have international travel in general. Like we can actually book flights to most countries now. So that's exciting. I think that's something I would want to plan for and try and at least go to, do one international trip in the meantime.
So where would you want to go?
I mean, the ones I've kind of been hearing of that are more accessible in terms of flights are the European countries and the UK. Flights to London are pretty reasonable these days.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't mind doing that, but I know London's really expensive to travel to. But I think I like countries that have cold or cooler weather.
Depends when you go though, because if it's like early next year, then it'll be hot here. It'll be cold there.
Yeah, well, that's what I would love to do that because I hate summer, especially Sydney summer where it's just like, actually it hasn't been that bad the last few years, but in general it gets really, really humid and warm during December and January, which is like the peak of summer. So yeah, I'd love to travel during those months and be off in a different country where it's cool. But yeah, any of those countries really, whatever's accessible. Like you can't really be picky these days. The fact that we have any international travel, we had the trip to Japan planned. It was 2 years ago now. But that
2020.
yeah, that might be on
Yeah.
the cards now. And in my family, they were talking about going to Canada. Like we have a lot of cousins there.
Yeah.
So maybe that could be an option. Could go free accom. And we can see snow depending on when we go. So a lot of options, but I think I would love to do at least one, ideally two international trips in between then.
Yeah.
New Zealand is obviously the easiest, but we've been there and it's really nice, but I don't know if I'd prefer to go somewhere new.
Yeah. Me too.
I wouldn't mind going to the South Island actually. Queenstown was really nice, and it's definitely a place that you can visit as many times as you want, and it'll still be nice. But yeah, I think that's kind of one of my goals is to travel, if as long as it's possible, in the next 6 months. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We've got the wedding, and then another wedding, and then hopefully travel in between.
And maybe a honeymoon after the second wedding.
Yeah, that'll be good. And then what's next?
Then babies.
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 Plural. One will suffice. So I guess that's a good segue into, when we were talking about doing this podcast, we were kind of thinking of topics that we wanted to discuss, and one of the ones that came up was babies, because from a mixed race or mixed religion marriage, we kind of knew that was going to be challenging, and that's something that we discussed quite a bit before we got married. So yeah, that's something we thought we should discuss, because even till now, there's always going to be questions that we have or concerns that you can't really address them until you have kids. Like it's all hypothetical until you do. But yeah, like what are your thoughts on that? Like we did discuss like in terms of religion, how we're going to raise them, in terms of like parenting styles, because we both come from ethnic families, and I think both of our parents have similar parenting styles to an extent. Like we were raised in a similar sort of way.
Opposites.
Opposites.
Yeah.
I was saying they're similar.
I know, but I think they're opposites.
Why?
Because I feel like my parents were very relaxed sort of in the way they brought me up. They were more strict with my brother, but he was the firstborn. And then when I was born, they were a lot more chill and sort of like didn't get as involved in my life. And I feel like that's the opposite to your parents, where they were very strict when you were younger and sort of like influenced a lot of what you did. Or like,
do you mean like they were less like when you say your parents were less strict when they had you? In what sense? Because I know from an educational sense they were equally as strict. Like especially your mum.
Not really. Like my parents had sort of let me do what I want in terms of the subjects I chose and like the course I did. They didn't really try to tell me like you need to do this, you need to study this subjects and this subject and become this profession. Like it was just up to me, really.
That's a stark contrast, because when I when I was in high school in year 12, like I was discussing with my parents, and I kind of said maybe I won't go to uni. Like maybe like I had other things I wanted to do. Like I was thinking of going to aviation school, which is like a college, but it's not uni. Or just not going to uni and just working for a while. And that obviously didn't go down well, and that wasn't an option. I was kind of told that I can do, the three main disciplines that ethnic people, or at least in our culture, people say is like, you can do engineering, you can do medicine. I think the other one was like something to do with health in like the medical field. So those were kind of the options that I was given. And obviously I chose engineering. Well, I don't know if I chose it, but it was like the least sort of off-putting option at the time. So that's kind of what I did. But I think, in terms of parenting styles, like what I meant was more, I guess, in a general sense, ethnic parents kind of have similar characteristics in terms of what they value and kind of like how they like to gloat about their kids' achievements. And I think a lot of their parenting philosophies are driven by status within their own communities. And so they want to be able to talk about their kids, and they feel a huge sense of pride and accomplishment when their kids are successful, or what they deem as successful.
It's like when you graduate and they basically act as though they've graduated. It's like it's their certificate.
Yeah, they might as well diploma. Just walk up on stage and get it.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't had that yet.
We didn't do any of the work.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I think in terms of what we discussed, obviously from a religious perspective, we agreed that our kids would be raised Muslim from like we haven't decided on the exact sort of scope of that in terms of how much we'll incorporate religion into their lives until obviously they're old enough to decide for themselves.
Yep.
And then parenting style, I think we both kind of have a similar sort of style that I think we'll have when it comes to things like discipline or focus on education, or kind of what our values are and what we would prioritize in terms of our kids' future.
I think you're a bit less focused on education since you hate the institution.
Well, I think education wise, that is actually something we're quite different in, because you've gone to uni and you've done.
So have you.
I've gone, but I haven't
You've still gone.
I haven't come out of it.
You act like you've uni hasn't helped you at all in life when
it hasn't.
It might have.
It hasn't.
It definitely helped you get, some jobs. Some of your jobs.
But I think just in terms of our views on education, you've obviously been instilled, like you say your parents weren't strict, but they still, really valued education, and they really wanted you to, if you said you didn't want to go to uni, obviously they would have had a meltdown and said you have to go to uni.
That's the thing. I would have never wanted to not go to uni because I went to a selective high school, and that was just the path everyone took.
Yeah, because you were raised that way, right? If selective school,
but it wasn't even to do with my parents. It was just everyone around me as well.
But someone had to make that choice. When you were in year 6, who told you that you should go to this school?
My parents told me to do the test. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
what
I
mean. Did the selective high school
test. Because if they didn't, would you have said yourself?
I wouldn't have known about it because I would have been in year 6.
You're old enough. You're not a child. I mean, you are a child.
I wouldn't have known what a selective high school is. You don't really find out about that unless your parents actively look for opportunities for you.
Well, I was given that opportunity as well in year 6 when I was told that selective school, for those of you that don't know, selective school is, well, you explain it because you've been there. What's the difference between a selective school and or not public school, but a normal school?
A local school. Yeah. Well, basically you have to pass a test and you put your preferences of schools in a list, and then you just hear back which one you got into, basically.
A list of selective schools.
Yeah, a list of selective schools. So my school that I got into wasn't my first choice, but it was second, I think. But basically it's gifted and talented children in one school. And it's not private though. Private is funded by the parents pay fees and stuff. It's just a public school, as in you still pay fees, but everyone pays for public school small fees.
Not our parents.
But you're supposed to, aren't you? Each semester you pay some sort of fee.
It's a admin fee.
It's small, yeah.
And every time they send you a bill, I think every 6 months or every year, And then there's like a loophole basically because if you go to a local public school, it's kind of assumed that the kids that go there, their families aren't super well off. So if you write the school a letter saying that I'm in financial trouble or I can't afford to pay these fees, they kind of just waive it.
Mm.
And for every year of my high school life, my dad would write a letter to say, uh, along those lines.
Did he just use a template or was it like different
I
every
think it was a
time?
template. I think it was just he would change the date to like, oh, it's 2010 now, and then
Gosh.
plug in the date and would send it. And like the school probably knew what we were doing, but it was just a loophole, and I don't think we ever paid any fees. But yeah, so what is the difference between a selective school and a normal school, like in terms of your education and what, like, do you get more opportunities or do you get access to better teachers or
Yeah.
resources?
Yeah, I think you probably do get access to better teachers. Like hearing about your sort of teachers, I think my teachers are probably better. And also it's just like this environment where everyone around you is really smart as well. So it sort of like encourages you to like work hard and try and get good marks because everyone sort of like compares each other. It's very competitive.
That sounds kind of toxic. It doesn't
It is
sound
toxic, yeah.
competitive. Like if you're like when it comes to real life after you get out of high school, you're always taught that you're only competing with yourself. And if you're progressing and you're better than you were yesterday, then that's progress and that's all you need to worry about. But in that sort of environment in high school, even to an extent in our high school, which obviously wasn't some um, academically focused school, but people were still comparing. Like there were still smart kids in our classes, and they would always compare grades. But that's kind of something that you're not taught after school. Like you're not meant to be doing that.
Yeah. You're not meant to be, but you probably like if you do go to a school like that, it sort of gets like instilled in you to be
Being
competitive.
competitive, because you don't do that at uni either. You don't actually really find out what other people got
Unless you have
unless
friends and then you're like, oh, what did you get?
yeah, but they don't grade you based on there's 200 people in this grade and not grade in this course, and you got the highest kind of thing. I don't think you'd ever even know unless you asked every single person. Unless you got
I
100
think
out of 100,
you
then
might get
yeah,
an award if you get the best in the whole grade, don't
I wouldn't know.
you?
I wasn't even like close to the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess that's something we probably should discuss then in terms of our differences on education. But you kind of already know how I feel about education and I know how you feel about it. So it's not a matter of not knowing. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of what we compromise on in terms of our kids and how we want to raise them and how much we want to instill this culture of education.
Mm.
I think I'm not against education. I'm against how it's delivered and how much like the process and the structure of it. I think it's a bit too rigid. I just don't like it. That like how it's kind of enforced, and as I think I used the analogy of how it's like a prison,
Hmm.
the whole school system.
Well, things might be different by the time our kids are, school age because we live in a society that's becoming more open to like customization, sort of, with courses and like, especially with uni and options opening for people to go into TAFE courses like
That's a,
in high school.
that's the thing though. I don't think the education system moves along with that stuff. I think they've obviously done it like when we had COVID restrictions and lockdowns. It was kind of enforced upon them to introduce remote learning. And they kind of at the beginning they really struggled with that. They didn't have any sort of resources which they could translate into an online platform. So they were kind of just winging it. And
Mm.
from the things I've heard, it was really terrible. But now, like in the last few months, it's gotten better because it's been like 2 years now.
Mm.
So they would have had to get better. But even having all those resources now, I still think that once the restrictions ease and COVID kind of assimilates into normal life, I still think that school will just resume as normal. Like it's not gonna all the stuff that they made progress in terms of remote learning. I'm
Mm.
not so sure that it will still stick around. I think they'll just go back to their old ways.
Might be possible that they'll change the hours in the school day, or just make it so that you don't have to go in every day. But that's
I
unlikely.
heard about that because, like, in Australia we have a 9 to 3 p.m. school day.
Roughly, like
Most
schools
schools,
change. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
most
around that.
schools are 9 to 3. And that whole sort of system is based on a really old-fashioned idea of the 9 to 5 work life, like where everyone works, and then they pick up their kids after school. Whereas now, obviously, with work, everything is changing, and people don't necessarily work those hours, and people have a lot more flexibility. So it doesn't really make much sense in terms of timings why it's the same for every kid. Like it should be based on what's convenient for their parents as well.
Mm,
And 9 to 3, from what I've heard, like the offices I've worked in, it's a real nuisance. Like in terms of parents having to pick up their kids,
yeah.
like they don't get out of work till 5, but then the kids, they finish at 3, and then they have to organize. Either they have to leave early and pick them up, or they have to organize for them to be picked up, or they have like after school care. Um, there's a lot of issues around that don't really get talked about much, but I think I read an article a while ago where they were talking about changing that, and some schools in Sydney were going to adopt, or they're going to trial out this new method of like kids can choose what times, like start times and finish times,
Mm,
as well as some days they can learn remotely, which I think that won't happen, but I think at least if we can start with more flexible timings,
yeah.
then it's a step forward.
But how would that work in terms of like to make it fit with the parents better? Then wouldn't it just be 9 to 5 and kids are at school for longer?
But your kids don't need to be at school that long. Like
So how
that's
would like what's a better time frame?
I think starting earlier and finishing earlier is a better time.
Okay.
Like if you start at 7 and you finish at 1,
Mm.
that's a much better time.
But how would the parents do that then if they're still working like 9 to 5, for example? Would they just go on their lunch break?
No, I think those parents probably need to do a later time. Like they start at 11 and finish at 5. Or, whatever works for them. I think the 9 to 5 structure is very different now. Even people that work full time don't necessarily work from those hours.
Mm.
People have flexibility in terms of when they can start and when they can finish, in most places anyway. So I think, I don't think the education system moves as fast as society moves, especially uni. It hasn't moved in decades. Like they have remote learning, but then I've always said that anything that the uni has available remotely, you can find for free on YouTube that's 50 times better than the material that they provide. Way easier to understand, way more informative, and way more applicable to something that you can actually use in real life, as opposed to the way uni does it is just kind of teach you how to memorize stuff and regurgitate it for exams and then never speak of it again. And that's kind of the way forward. And I just totally disagree with that method. And of course, that changes from degree to degree, but like for the most part, that's kind of the template that all uni courses have. And it's just, and you get to pay thousands a month for each course that you do as well. It's not like you can just find a free YouTube video and learn that same stuff, but you just don't have a piece of paper to show for it afterwards.
Yes, we get it. You don't want our kids to go to uni.
I've always said the same thing. Like if you want to go to uni to learn something that is very specialized and something that you absolutely need a degree for, then it makes sense. Something like you did law. You can't be a lawyer by watching videos or learning online.
Although I don't think that the way law is taught is very good either, because there's just no practical training. Well, that's why they have, you have to do the practical legal training after you get your degree, because they don't actually teach you anything practical at uni. It's all theoretical stuff and it doesn't actually help, like, when you become a lawyer.
That's typical of most degrees though.
Yeah.
Even engineering, you
And not
learn.
for like doctors and stuff. They actually learn stuff they'll need to do
Yeah,
to be
because
a doctor.
doctors is the job is also theoretical. for a lot of it. Like when you diagnose people, it's, you have to physically assess them, but it's actually what's in your brain that helps you assess them and make those connections in terms of diagnosis. So the job itself requires knowledge and information,
That's
whereas
true.
law is more
You can
practical,
just Google that stuff. Like,
which I think they do.
I'm sure they do.
Like our experience at the vet recently, they were also Googling stuff.
Yeah.
So you think these people are professionals because they've gone to uni for a long time. And I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that even then, there's still, the benefit of the internet and they still utilize that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, if you wanted to do one of those things, if you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or engineer, then you do have to go to uni for that. But if you want to start a business or if you want to become an artist or whatever, something creative, you don't necessarily need to go to uni for that. You're just throwing money down the drain, I think. And that's kind of the same philosophy I'd have for my kids and again, it comes down to their own interests. Like you can't tell them what they need to be interested in and what sort of path they should follow, which you weren't given that, but I definitely was, and I hated that. So I think that's, in terms of education, that's going to be my way of parenting.
And what about more of the mixed race aspect of parenting? Like, do you think that will pose any challenges for us? Like having a child that's basically half Pakistani, quarter Italian, quarter Filipino, will they have some sort of like
it's not quarter
cultural identity? It is.
It's a third of each thing.
No, it's not a third, because you are fully Pakistani, so they would be half.
Yeah, but then you're half and half.
Yeah, I'm half and half, so that would be like distilled down further into quarter and quarter.
But a quarter plus a quarter is not a half, is it?
It is, yeah.
Oh yeah, it is.
2 quarters is a half, so it will be half you, quarter me.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is going to be confusing.
That's confusing for a kid. But also, like, if you look at like lots of celebrities and stuff, their cultural heritage is like lots of different things.
Yeah, but
what do they identify as? Like,
I mean, for real though, like not like you go down the ancestry tree and like try and say I'm 5% this and 10% that. I mean, for real, like what you actually are.
What would they identify as then? Like, what would they call themselves if someone asked, "What's your ethnicity?"
And that's what I'm saying. In our case, it's for real. Like they are half Pakistani and they are quarter.
Yeah, I know, but like, what would they tell people?
I don't know.
Like, they're not going to be like explaining half this and quarter. Like, they're probably just going to be like
mixed race. It's too
Pakistani.
TLD.
There's just too much. Yeah.
I think they'll have to come up with a way to say it quickly, I guess.
This is something they would have to worry about later though. Like, kids don't really.
And that's not actually an issue. Like that's not in itself, it's not an issue. Like it could lead to identity issues, I guess, if that comes down to us and how we present it to them.
Yeah.
But I think it's also really cool that being a part of so many different cultures, they get to experience a lot more than we did.
Yeah.
And they get to try out different foods and different cultures and
well, I would want
families.
I would want to raise them as like a citizen of the world almost. Like they're open to like, trying foods from all cuisines and all cultures, and they're open to watching, or learning about different cultures as well. Like not only ours, obviously more ours than any others, but like just being open to that sort of stuff and like travel and that sort of experience.
Yeah. Well, they kind of will naturally be like that because they're not going to identify with any one sort of culture. So naturally they'll be more flexible and open-minded. So that I think that will naturally come to them, but there is definitely a challenge involved from a parenting perspective to make sure that they don't have that identity issue or like
and
crisis.
Also like you never know if they could be bullied or
depends how they look. They're funny looking then.
Yeah, if they're funny looking. Let's hope not. But yeah. Or they could just be confused. Like like all the other kids could be talking about their background and they're just like, they don't even understand what they are kind of thing.
Oh, they'll understand. I think.
What do you mean?
They'll understand.
They'll understand.
Make them understand. Because like they're gonna grow up, like especially from my family side, right? Like the culture is so strong that you can't not understand it. From your side, it's possible, like especially a Filipino side, like it's almost
it's kind of like,
non-existent.
yeah, it's kind of like been very diluted with my mum, like didn't really pass on any sort of the language. Food, not really. She doesn't really cook much Filipino food. There isn't really much of the Filipino culture in our lives. Italian there is because, you know, we have my grandma on my dad's side. And then you've got like Italian food that my grandma makes. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the Filipino side, that's something that, I mean, I don't know how we're going to instill that because I don't even think you know much about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's, if it's not a priority for your family, then it's not really a priority anyway.
But still, you can't just like sort of sweep it under the carpet.
No, like I'm not saying you do, I'm just saying they know what they are, but they're not influenced by it because you're not influenced by it. It's very hard to pass that down when you haven't been passed.
I know.
Unless you make a conscious effort to learn about it yourself and then pass it down. But from from an Italian perspective, that's obviously is an influence. So that's something they'll pick up. And then my side is like a very heavy influence, and they'll pick that up.
I'm sure they'll learn Urdu like super quickly.
Faster than you.
In our household. Faster than me, yes, because I'm an adult. So, you know, it's harder for adults to learn a language.
You know, actually, I was reading the 4-Hour Workweek, and Tim Ferriss, he says that actually it's not harder for adults to learn a new language because like adults are obviously smarter than kids. They have more brain capacity. They do. They have more brain capacity.
Kids pick up language very easily.
They do, but the difference is that adults can learn the language faster. Like they can learn the common words faster than kids can. And the thing with language is that you shouldn't strive. And this, I'm not me saying that. I'm just paraphrasing the book. You shouldn't try and learn 100% of something when if you can learn 95% of it, the last 5% could take you 2 to 5 years to learn, like to perfect, if you want to try and be a completely native speaker. Whereas 95% is still almost 100% and you can still fluently speak it. So if you're striving for perfection, then yeah, you will be slower than a kid. But if you're trying to learn it to be able to speak it, then as an adult, you should be able to do it. If you're committing to it, like not, obviously kids, they don't have anything else going on. So they'll just
they don't even need lessons though. That's the thing with kids. Like they're just exposed to it. They're just around it and they just like absorb it. Whereas I'm around it as well. I'm not absorbing it really. Like
because kids are more curious and
it's not that. It's not that I'm not like trying to understand. It's just that.
No, I'm not saying you're not curious. I'm just saying like.
What are you saying?
I'm saying naturally kids, they have nothing else going on in their brains because they're stupid. Like
they're not stupid.
No, like they're kids. Like they don't have to worry about anything. They have nothing else in their brain, so they just pick up. They're very sort of I don't know the word is,
like
but
a sponge.
Yeah, like they pick up everything around them, and that's all they have to live for at that point.
I just don't understand how they can like understand words that are in another language.
They don't understand it until you explain it to them, or they pick up like when you say this word, you also do this action.
Yeah, I see. So they're more like taking it from context.
Yeah. Whereas I think as an adult, you try and pick up, how is the accent said, or what's the context, like in terms of a vocal sense, like what sort of words follow that word and like what's the sentence structure kind of. I think you analyze it too much.
I don't though. It's just like I can't even analyze it because I can't get to that point even.
But are you thinking about it from a perspective of they said this word, now they're doing this, so this word must mean this?
No, because to me I can't see the word in my mind, so I can't like remember the word for future reference because I can't figure out what word in the sentence meant that thing that was happening at the time, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I've never learned another language. I've kind of just learnt the languages that I was raised with. Um, but I think I'm just saying I don't think it's impossible for adults. I don't think kids are that much smarter that they can pick up languages faster. Like if you actually look at the science behind it. I'm just quoting the book. Like I don't know if what research is done to say that. Maybe there is science behind why kids can pick up language faster, but I think it's definitely in terms of being able to understand common words. If you just put less pressure on it and kind of just jump into it, like if you just jump into, watching videos that are in that language and just picking up common words and then just talking, even if it's like completely broken and non-fluent, the more you do it, the faster you learn. But anyway, yeah, our kids will pick up that pretty quickly.
They'll be fluent and I'll just be like left out when everyone around me is speaking Urdu, and then I can only catch like a few words every now and then.
They can keep secrets from you.
Pretty much.
Or we can.
That's rude.
Well, you have time. You
I have time, yes.
9 months to learn.
9 months. Oh, really?
You said May, at end of May.
I said after May is when we'll be.
Straight after the honeymoon or during the honeymoon.
Ew. Anyway, those are the main things in terms of kids. And then I guess also the religion. We sort of touched on it, but I guess the conversations we've had about that is just like choosing to raise them in one religion so they wouldn't be confused, just like they're probably already going to be confused about their ethnicity. We don't want to confuse them with too many different elements. So, yeah. But also taking some aspects of the different religions and the parts that we want to sort of pass on and the values that we want to pass on.
Well, I think when you come to the realization that the main religions all have the same values for the most part.
Yeah, they all have the same like positive things they're trying to teach.
Yeah.
About how to live your life.
And it's the same negative things that mostly that they're trying not to do, which also, even if you take the religion out of it, is just kind of what's part of being a good person. So I think, as much as it's challenging to have, well, we're not really mixed religion anymore because we have the same religion, but coming from like the background, it can be challenging. But I think the more you think about like the actual specifics of it, it definitely eases a lot of those concerns, because as long as you just teach them to be a good person, ultimately it all works out. Well, I guess maybe it's easier said than done and we're in for a surprise, but I think that's kind of the path that we're going to take, is just try and impose all the right, not impose, that's the wrong word, pass down all the right, the right values that we think are best. And then kind of just let them, as they grow up, and kind of make up their own decision as to how much or how little they want religion in their life. So yeah, I think that covers most of what we've been up to and where we're going.
Yeah.
We're definitely moving forward towards this Hunter Valley wedding. That's kind of the main priority for us right now. And then after that, we'll I think the next few episodes that we're going to do are going to be a lot more relaxed, and we're kind of going to be trying to do more, what's the word? Like
conversational?
Yeah, well, I guess most of this, we're aiming to have it conversational, but even more so the next few, where we're just going to cover off topics that have come up recently for us, or topics that maybe people will suggest.
We can expand on previous topics we've talked about as well.
Yeah, because over time, like, our views can change and our experiences will vary. So there's just a lot. There's like an unlimited amount of things we could talk about. But yeah, from moving forward, like I think in terms of our journey, in terms of you assimilating into my family, and us getting what we started with, us, you meeting my family and then us getting engaged, us having the nikah, you going through Ramadan and experiencing your first Eid,
Living with your family?
Yeah, moving in with in-laws. That was kind of the main highlights of our journey so far. Obviously, we're still very early on in this journey, and there's many more chapters to come. And that's the aim of this podcast, is to continue to take you guys along with us on this journey. But we don't have a set plan. Like, we'll be jumping into topics that we find interesting, and that we think we can bring you value in terms of your own relationships, whether they're mixed or standard.
Standard.
The standard type where you're both the same race.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, every relationship has similar challenges and similar joys. So yeah, stay tuned. We have a lot more coming up, but that's all we have for you for this episode. Again, if you're enjoying this series, we'd really appreciate it if you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.